That would be fun. You're welcome. Okay, we're going to do a roll call again. Scarlett?
Scarlett Cantley.
Mary Viator.
Michael Johnson.
Woody Castellati.
Elizabeth Accomando. Trisha Farrell.
Eddie Arkin.
Jay Foy.
Burgess Hanson. We also have Miss Laura Donlin, Labor Legal Counsel on Zoom.
Rob Robinson.
Kenny Lawrence.
Miriam Heiser.
Raquel McIntosh.
Okay, very good. All right, Mr. Henson.
Yes. Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, general public. Thank you for being here tonight. Tonight, we're bringing forward the actual budget recommendation for board consideration and approval. This will set the assessments for fiscal year 2026, which starts October 1st of 2025 through September 30th of 2026. We have revised the budget numbers very significantly from the first go round, which, as I stated, was not really what I normally do, but I did it in this case just so you could get an idea of what the departments request. So this tonight's budget presentation, which Ms. McIntosh and I will be doing with, of course, input from Ms. Heiser, as well as Mr. Lawrence, and of course, Mr. Robinson. We'll be going over the different functions as well as what those assessment increases are. So with that, we can go ahead and start. We are doing things differently than we have it done in the past. So again, we're getting right into the numbers. Everyone in here understands the functions of what we do, so we don't need to go through and talk about departmental functions and tasks. So we're just going to hit right in. I'm sorry. We're going to go right into the numbers tonight and try to get through this. And I do want to advise the board that whatever you do set tonight, if you want to come back later before the middle part of September, you can adjust down with your assessments, but you cannot increase. So whatever you set tonight, you cannot go above that number. Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Good evening, board and members of the public. So I'm going to start us off this evening by running through the big picture of where the district's proposed budget is for this upcoming fiscal year. And so on your screen, you'll see the first chart we have here are the revenues and other sources that will be funding the proposed appropriations for this fiscal year. So we have assessments coming in at just under 21 million. Then we have some grants and appropriations of 1.3 million. We have some interest earnings, permit fees, some other charges for services relating to parks, some other revenues, and then we have a fund balance release of 200,000, and that's coming out of the M1 units to support some capital outlay, which Mr. Hanson will go through a little bit later. And then finally, we're doing an inventory release of our millings. And so that number is just for roads and sidewalks. So that's just the operations department that would be coming out of their fund balance for. And so we ended with a total budget of 23.993 million. And the chart below just breaks it out. So you can see percentage wise where the revenues. So obviously your biggest revenue source is your assessments coming in at 88%. And that is the bulk of your revenue coming through right now. Right. So now we'll take a look at the appropriations. And so this chart is showing you what the expenditures are by object, and the district's legal level of authority on the budget is at the object level. And just a reminder, the objects are personnel, operating, debt service, and capital outlay. And so you can see here the personnel budget came in at 9.3 million, the operating at 10.76, and the capital outlay at just under 4 million. There is no debt service in your budget, except for the bonds, which are handled separately. So this is just your operating level budget. And so you can see that operations is your highest object level at 45%, followed by personnel at 39%. Right, and then we also wanted to, from a high level, show you what the increases in the budget were. So the total budget increased from the prior year by just under 4.1 million in these functions. So aggregate production was just under 1.3. SRG or Unit 20 or M3, we have quite a few names for it. It's at 31,000. Engineering and attorneys, 601. And Mr. Hansen will go through the increases for these as we go through the tables. Your other professional services at 330, wages, pension, and taxes for your additional staffing in the upcoming year, 782,000, and then capital outlay at just under 1.1 million. And so we just wanted to give you a broad overview of where exactly your increase was for this year and where the numbers were coming from. Right. And Mr. Hansen?
Yeah, if you can just scroll down so they can actually see underneath that. Thank you. So just quickly, what we did is we created this chart so the board as well as the general public can understand these are the different functions, not necessarily the objects of expenditures, because those three fall under these different departments or functions, but these are the functions. So almost all, so just to break it down to make it even more informative for the public, for admin, for administration, which includes the board, legal, certain components of what Mr. Foy does as a district engineer, finance, IT, HR, customer service, that all falls under administration. All units pay into administration. So that's one of the few where everybody pays into that. And as you can see, that is going up. Some of that is related to legal costs for next year to look at revenue, different ways to calculate revenue to bring before the board for stormwater, potentially for parks, any activation that the board may want to do of other areas of the district. So it includes that. It also includes the creation of a new position, which we call the media and public outreach specialist, which would handle social media, any type of newsletters, setting up press interviews with the board when there's hurricanes, things of that nature. And then we're also recommending creation of a part-time employee that would be UAS, which is an unmanned aerial systems or aerial vehicle specialist, and a drone as well. This would be for two reasons primarily. First one is to go and look at roadways, swales, and canals to determine maintenance levels, sending a notice out to any landowners where they're having trees growing across or anything like that, because one of the complaints we get is they would prefer to trim their trees than have us come through, because when we do cutbacks, we do not do them at manicure or landscape level. We're just cutting for inspection and for line of sight for safe vehicular passage or for pedestrians if there's a sidewalk. So this would give them the ability to do that, but it also saves us money, because right now what we would have to do is send somebody in a vehicle to inspect each of those areas. This is something that we can do much quicker and efficiently. The other aspect of it is post hurricane or major rain event, it would allow us to get to areas very quickly to do assessments, not only for our benefit, but even for public safety. So if fire rescue needs to get to an area that may be hit with a tornado or some other tragedy like that, that would help them. So that's why we want to do the drone program. So moving on, and then also it's creating a chief administrative officer by eliminating the chief human resources officer, and that position would still be responsible for human resources, but it would also include procurement, customer service, and
Grants.
grants. Thank you. And then, of course, finance, we are making a shift there. I'm recommending the elimination of a full-time employee as a chief financial officer and going to what would be a fractured contractual position, which we currently have. However, as the contract is now, it's a full-time position that would actually transition into probably somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 hours per year, which is a savings because we still get the knowledge and skill set, especially during budget and audit. And as we're looking at new revenue formulas or calculations, that position would also help with that. And then we are just going to maintain 2 full-time employees within finance. One would be a senior accountant, and the second would be the accounts payable and payroll specialist, which currently exists. So if you recall, as part of the ERP, we're now doing payroll in-house to save money. So that's also allowing us to make sure that there's separation between finance, procurement, and human resources as well. And I would have direct supervision over the 2 finance employees. And then additionally, under administration, Mr. Robinson will be taking more of an active role of managing what we commonly call the operations department, but what we're recommending to now split into stormwater and roads and sidewalks. So in addition to his other duties, he'll actually be directly overseeing that area to ensure quality assurance, as well as projects staying on time, swales, things of that nature. So as a segue, we'll talk a little bit about stormwater. So as within stormwater, we know that our current assistant director, who would become the stormwater director, what we're calling the chief stormwater officer, he plans to retire in about 1.5 to 2 years. So the goal there is we have 2 in-house employees that would be under him in their current capacity. So they're not being necessarily changed, but we are changing the title to superintendent, but it's the same thing. So it's not any type of salary range increases, anything like that. If they work out, then we can potentially, raise one of them into that position. Or one of the things that I think the board should look at long-term is bringing in some type of PE for that. You're still required by state statute to have your own district engineer, but this may save costs on certain things that they would be able, or that position would be able to do, rather than paying Mr. Foy's firm to do some of that. There's still by statute things that only he can do, and so you still have to maintain that, but this would be a way to potentially decrease costs in the future. I'm also looking at, the other reason why I'm recommending this is I think as we move forward in the future, as we have more recently experienced, South Florida Water Management is becoming more of a regulatory agency than they have in the past. And then also things with the state or even the county where we may have to be doing more monitoring and things like that, where may require an engineer, but not the district engineer. And I'd rather not have the board and the taxpayers have to pay for outside firms to do that on an hourly basis. And within stormwater, the way we have this structure now, we're breaking this up into 3 areas. So we now refer to unit 20 as the M3, and we're basing these on basins, or how we look at them are permits from South Florida Water Management. So you have the M1 basin, which is the largest basin by far. Second would be the M2, and then of course, unit 20 or the M3. So what we have done is based on the acreage, because that's how we currently assess, we have proportioned certain costs or expenditures based on that. However, with the M3, as I stated in my transmittal letter, because you still have several phases of capital projects to do within that area, their maintenance is still going to be a little different than what we're traditionally seeing in the M1 and the M2. So there is going to be some cost difference because we now have to start maintaining their area a little differently than we have had to do in the past because of the capital projects being done, and we do not want those to fall back into disrepair. So in the M1, the way we have this split out now is we have major capital projects that need to occur with pump stations 2 and 3, as well as some control structures or gate actuators that need to be replaced. And then there's a similar project in the M2. However, and you don't have to go, I'm just going quickly through them. So, yeah, no, that's okay. So with M2, we have the ability to carry it over 2 fiscal years, whereas in the M1, the condition requires us to do it up front. And part of the reason why we're requesting the 200,000 out of the fund balance is to just take a little bit of pressure off the M1 units with that capital project. I don't normally recommend that, but in this case, because there is an increase because of the 640, we want to do that. The other increase dealing with the M1 is the 640 expansion. As you all know, last week, the governor, did sign off on the $450,000 legislative appropriation. So that helped us there, but we have a significant increase because we still have to carry part of that for Mr. Foy to do the design and then to initiate the permit process, as well as some other testing that may still be required to do. Because my goal is to try to get that out of escrow as quickly as possible. And hopefully, if things continue on a good path financially on a national level, perhaps the interest rates next year will start to decrease and make it more appropriate for a bond issue. Because the initial phase for the 640 to do the construction for just the surface levy is approximately $15 to $18 million. And that's not something you'll be able to assess very easily on the M1 unit owners, but it begins to have a significant impact on stormwater management for the M1. Yeah. So moving on then, with the roads and sidewalks, you'll actually see a decrease there. So most of that decrease is because we are recommending that swales and culverts and the crews and any of the associated costs actually fall under stormwater where they belong. And the reason being is the primary function for a swale is to collect, temporarily store, and convey water into the canals and out into the larger South Florida water management system. Culverts, their primary function is to convey water through our canal systems. They're not, while the have a secondary of moving vehicles over. That is not our primary use of those. So with roads and sidewalks, we've also been able to save money with using the stockpile for the millings, which is why there's $1 million inventory transfer, but also with what we'll be talking about later, the aggregate production that begins reducing the cost of hauling and other material increases that we saw with the Palm Beach aggregate. And then, of course, the other area where you're going to see significant capital improvement project recommendations is with Parks and Recreation, and specifically with the Acreage Community Park North Athletic Fields. We are requesting that, and it's a necessity, that those lights and the wiring and controls be replaced. They're pushing almost 30 years old. They have a lifespan of about 20 to 25 years. So they're at the end of their life. And if you do not have lights, then your fields are basically useless for most of the year. The other aspect for the North Athletic Fields, but specifically for the football fields, is we need a new well pump for irrigation. So that covers the permitting, drilling the well, and the purchase of a pump and installation of it. And then the other area within parks is dealing with the court resurfacing at Temple for the basketball, tennis / pickleball courts, but it's not using traditional asphalt and then surfacing. We're actually recommending a much cheaper, but we feel good alternative, and that would be the floating surface that Mr. Lawrence had brought in here a month ago. Moving forward. So basically, that's about a $200,000 project versus almost a $500,000 project by changing that surface. And then the last area, which is also supplemented by a grant, is to put in a general open play athletic field at Citrus Grove Park. We're also recommending within parks that we look at bringing park maintenance in-house as far as all the general parks, but not the athletic fields at North ACP. What we'll be recommending there is that we go out for an RFP for something that's very specific to our needs. We've tried to piggyback in the past off of other municipal or county contracts, and they just don't match what we really need. So we will be working on that in this upcoming fiscal year. And you'll note that those costs have been adjusted within the department. And then, of course, aquatics, which has minimal, that's just your vegetative control and canals throughout the district. So,
Burgess.
yes.
On the aquatics, is there a reason why we pulled it out of stormwater?
It's always been a separate department. Yeah.
So are we assessing the stormwater or the aquatics the same as stormwater by acreage?
Yes, yes.
Because
yes.
the number looked the same to me across the board, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that it's being done.
Yeah,
by
everything,
acreage.
right? Everything that we do basically it is based on acreage. And
Okay.
that's something that, again, in this upcoming fiscal year, I'm hoping that the board will give us more in some areas like stormwater. I think we have some general direction there, but there's other areas where I think we may want to explore with parks, and even looking at expanding who pays for parks, because they're open to all of our residents, but not all units pay into it. But that's something that's a business decision for the board to make. And that's something hopefully you'll discuss at your next strategic planning process that deals with Parks and Rec.
Yes, so if you, so here we have the assessment chart and aquatic.
Yeah, you're still, sharing the one page. Yes, no.
All right, so the aquatic control. So these are all the units that get charged for aquatic. So it's 1 through 19. And then M1H are the ones that get charged for aquatic control.
It's part of their general maintenance. We charge it through that way because it's a minimal amount. So I hit most of them, so if you want to go ahead and
Okay.
continue with so now what we'll do is we'll actually go through the different departments and we can provide a little more detail if you'd like. But right now, if you notice, since it's up, we'll just go ahead and start here. But are the unit assessments across the board. So all of them, whether they're units that have full service or partial service or only, for instance, drainage outfall. So if you want to.
All right, so the very last line of the spreadsheet shows you what the net change per acre is by unit. And so you have 57.59 for units 1 through 5. And then the M2 units, which are 612, M1, M2D, M2L, are 985. So these are the increases per acre for each unit. Unit 17 has a $15 increase. Unit 19, 137. Unit 20, 137. M1H, just under 200. So these are the changes proposed by the current budget based on the expenditures. So I'm going to go through the expenditures, and then we have a little chart on the expenditures that shows you the percentage increase for that department.
Can I just ask,
Yes.
why is unit 19A not paying for roads and sidewalk maintenance? And only stormwater?
Because currently they have no roadway other than, I guess, the 19.
But they're using our road, so I thought that was included.
Not in not in the water control plan.
Why would we not have included that? They're using our roadways and everybody else is paying. Why are they not paying?
It's something we can certainly look at changing the water control plan with, but whenever that went through that process, it was not included.
I don't understand why it wasn't included, so we need to fix that.
And I also think that when we look at unit 19, just not A, but all of those, that's something that we had talked about. You and I had some conversations, but I've also had them with some of the other board members, not your conversation, but the concept that Mr. Foy and I came up with, because it is not your typical land, how we assess based on an acre and a quarter. You're talking mainly commercial in some cases, but also the potential for multifamily in some of these. So that's something we'd have to review as well.
But the commercial properties on Orange Boulevard and Seminole Pratt, those all pay into road maintenance. So I just don't understand why we would have excluded that. We need to take a look at that, fix it.
You know,
I don't recall specifically, but the only entrance on Indian Trail roads directly is the entrance off of Hamlin. It doesn't have an exit on the Hamlin, so that may be the reason it happened. I'd have to go back and look at the water control plan, but that's probably why it was excluded from the road assessment.
All right, so now let's take a deep dive in the numbers. So as I had mentioned earlier, first we'll start with your revenues. So your administrative departments will generate 21.4 million in revenue. Parks, 420,000. Roads and sidewalks, 1.2 million of revenues and other sources because we're pulling down that million from your inventory. M1, 982,000. Of that, 200,000, as Mr. Hansen had mentioned, was a use of fund balance. And you have grant revenues of just under 758,000. So that includes your regular grants plus the state appropriations. And so your total revenues and other sources are 23.24 million, really. So your administration department has a total budget of 3,944,266. And let's go to the detail of that. And so you can see here that the change in admin for assessments is $15.34 per acre. So the assessment will be $149.20, and it was previously $133.86. So it went up 11% for admin. So your personnel costs came in at just under 1.9 million. Your operating costs at 2,008,000, and your capital outlay at 55,000. As Mr. Hansen had mentioned, the capital outlay for administration includes the UAS system and a GIS system are the two biggest items in your capital outlay for administration. Right. And then if we move into parks, your parks budget came in at just
What? Turn this thing down.
Oh,
Just-
don't say that.
Just tell me.
Can you hear it now? Are you still hearing it?
There's an echo.
I- And. And.
Let's see if that's still happening. Mr. Officer, is that still happening? Oh, it's good now.
Check the mic.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so for parks, we have an increase of $20.48 per acre. And so the parks assessment for fiscal year 2026 as proposed would be 148.11 per acre. The prior fiscal year was 127.63. And so the breakdown for parks, your personnel services came in at just under 1.2 million. Your operating costs came in at 1.651 million, and your capital outlay at 567,000. And as Mr. Hansen had mentioned, the breakdown for your capital outlay, there's one vehicle purchase being requested, and then we have the resurfacing, lighting, the well, and the improvements to Citrus Grove Park. So that's the breakdown that we have on parks.
Quick question. I noticed this earlier. The parks vehicle capital outlay, in one column it says 55,000 and the other column it says 65,000. Did we buy one last year for 55? Is that what that is in the E?
Last year we bought Mavericks,
We
not
bought, that's
F-250s.
for two, that was
It
for
was
two of
two-
the small vehicles.
Two Mavericks,
Yeah.
yes.
And the 65,000 is a 250?
250, yes.
Because we have to use it for
Right.
tone.
Okay.
And just for the public, normally we would do a hand-me-down from operations, but we literally have no running trucks that are available within operations to give them that would be in safe condition. That one diesel that they had.
We went through it with staff, the mechanics, and the diesel engine and that thing's pretty much expired. So this new one will be gasoline. It's better efficiency, way better economically for the maintenance of the vehicle as well. Yeah, they're 250 expired, pretty much.
All right.
And just because I mainly spoke about capital and some of the stuff at a higher level, but with parks and rec, it's the two park specialists, we're unfreezing those. Those were frozen. And again, those will be to cover maintenance of parks as well as to try to cover closing and openings. And whenever school gets out, we're trying to place them at certain areas, but that won't always happen at some of the smaller parks like Temple or Sycamore. So that's also part of the plan.
So that's,
And I was just getting
Yeah.
ready. And then it's a half or what we call part-time. So it's actually half of a frozen full-time position would be an equestrian specialist, and that will be specifically to cover evenings or weekends where we can't get coverage. And that position also drags and can do other things beyond just that. And then Mr. Lawrence and his team are working on that rec desk software program, which will also help the ALA with the concept of the resident versus non-resident, but that's happening in this, or yeah, I'm sorry, AAL, always get them backwards. Sorry. So the AAL, but we also plan to use that to monitor the horse arena as well, to require people to sign up because we are required by statute to show Coggins for different events or other things. So that will help. And then we also are hoping, and we'll bring it back in a policy to the board, but we want them to sign some type of affidavit that we'd have to work with Ms. Viator and her team with, that states that they are not a trainer or not using the arenas for commercial use, to crack down on that as well.
If they are, and if they wanted to, aren't they required to have the level 2 background check as
Mhm.
well?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all
But
right.
more importantly, they need to.
And the insurance.
Yeah, have
Yeah.
insurance, get a permit and actually pay to rent that.
Okay.
That's all. Sorry.
No,
But that's, I just want to clarify for the public, that's not us. That is a statutory requirement that we now have to make sure is being complied with. So. Okay.
all right. And then I'm going to switch to M1. And so your total budget for M1 came in at 5,671,139. And so that ended with assessments of $263.53 for the fiscal year per unit. So that was an increase of 121.53.
Just to note though, we basically, a lot of that is a transfer
Yeah.
of swales and culverts. So people or landowners would be paying that regardless. They just be paying it under a different.
Under
department.
roads and sidewalks. That's we saw. Right, so the personnel costs,
I'm
Oh.
sorry, just be.
no,
And there's another benefit to this that I forgot to mention earlier, but with doing this, only 12 units pay into roads and sidewalks. So there were others who were not necessarily paying for swale improvements or culvert improvements that should have been, that were benefited.
all right, and then the operating costs came in at 2.3 million. And your capital outlay at 954,000. I'll ask Mr. Robinson or Mr. Hanson to go through the capital outlay to give an explanation of how the numbers are derived.
Just before that, I'll let Mr. Robinson talk about the equipment, but there is something different that we are doing. So with the equipment that we use more, we are now recommending to the board that you no longer purchase that outright, that we actually start leasing it and then turning it in after the 2 or 3 year lease ends and getting new equipment. Because what's happening with a lot of the smaller skid steers or mini excavators is after year 4 or 5, we start seeing major mechanical or electrical issues, and then they're out of service for a while. So not only are we paying more for repairs, but then we have to rent on short-term basis until we get it back equipment. So it just doesn't make sense. But we're still recommending that you purchase larger equipment like dump trucks or bulldozers, graders, things of that nature, because those will run longer and we don't put as many hours on them as we do the smaller equipment. So Mr. Robinson, take it in there.
Bingo. Mr. Hanson said it as good as I could. What we found out with these skid steers, the 870s that we purchased, one was 4 and one was 5 years ago. Every time they go down and go up to repair, it's an $8,000 to $10,000 bill. Most of that is for the EGR systems, for the emissions. And as he had said, it's not only we're paying the downtime and the repair, but it's the lost productivity as well, where we have to go out and rent another skid steer. The higher utilization machines, and once upon a time when I had my own business, the skid steers, I used to turn them over every 2 years. We can look at how that is going to, and the good thing with these leases are, if in fact it is a good unit, we're not having, it's either low hours or we're not having a lot of issues with it, we can convert that to a purchase at any time. The larger equipment, the bigger excavators and the loaders, we are getting, 10 to 20,000 service hours out of those, which is industry standard before we have to turn those over for surplus. The old Caterpillar loader that we have right now, it's still in good shape. And that was a pre-emission. That's why it's still holding up quite well. So the dump truck, that's the road truck Pete, that would go into service and pull some of the contract hauling that we're currently spending out as well. We're trying to do this to remove a lot of the equipment rentals that we're seeing in the current budget. We know there's a need for it because of the escalation of work that we're doing. And it just makes fiscal sense to go ahead and purchase these machines instead of renting them month after month after month.
Are there any questions on the capital outlay for pumps and structures? Because we can certainly go over that again if you'd like, but it's pretty straightforward.
Can you just confirm, because we had this discussion, the last budget discussion, the work that's being done on the pump stations, pretty much everything under the capital outlay there, that is what Kenny is going to be working on, Kenny?
Kenny Morrison, yes.
Okay,
What he's been performing, we had to replace the coolant pipes for all the engines. They have interchangers, intercoolers in the water. They pump through. That's their radiator system, their cooling system. They do deteriorate because of electrolysis. The decking that's listed on there is the grating that basically holds all the pump structures up and their support systems. What we found doing the assessment was they were rotted off below water. Now that we've had we're 12 inches of drought, we've seen that water table go down. And when we did that last assessment, it was quite noticeable. They were rotted off below the water line. it's imperative that those structures to get rebuilt on that decking.
So the cost that's there is for doing in-house work.
In-house
and the
work
Materials.
and also contracting as well, because some of that stuff, we have to get cranes in there. We have to get the decks fabricated. We could do those in-house, but it's easier and more efficient to get it done by a supplier that manufacture these day in, day out.
And does
There's
this
no,
include the gate structures that we were discussing?
the gate structures, actuators, there's a lot, everything is rolled up into here too. The
The-
actuators and the arm things that, Kenny Morrison came up with the idea of the actuators rather than the manual ones. We'll be doing those in-house using, those actuator systems.
And just to be clear, though, this doesn't include his salaries already
He needs them.
connected. Yeah, so that is just materials or any contractual work that does not include.
In
his
that
salary.
figure
Yeah.
specifically. Okay. Very good.
And then we also have 40,000 for dredging. So
Do we have a figure on what we spent on rentals of equipment? Off the top of your head?
Oh, off the top of my head, it was quite substantial this year. I don't have, I knew it was, we were way over.
we have
I have it.
We do
I
have
have
it.
it through, yes, I have it through March.
I know we had some overages in that department, so I'm just curious exactly if that was a good chunk of it.
A lot of it was, we had, several items go down. But this will offset that rental budget. You could see in the proposed budget, we slashed that considerably.
Yes.
And moving forward, we will keep it down to that level.
It's still
Thank you.
really high. And, I would like to say that, I've received lots of inquiries and seen complaints even on Facebook, but I've gotten calls from people asking about equipment that we're renting or leasing, and it just sitting there not being used. Apparently, we forget that we have equipment in some places. So I would like to make sure that if we are renting or leasing equipment, that we're actually utilizing it. And it's not sitting somewhere for days, weeks, or months on end, because
Specifically
this
the
is
rent.
not, this is a waste of money. If we're renting a piece of equipment, we should be using it. If we're not using it, then, we rented it too long. We need to look at how we're negotiating that, what we're doing, but we need to be utilizing that equipment when we've got it.
I understand fully. One of the things I've been undertaking the last several months is going around and at the crew chief updates, having them give me a equipment utilization. And if it's not on hours, plus I'm doing drive rounds, if I see something, I'm not going out and chalking tires, but I know something's been moved or used or not. And if not, but we've cut a lot of the rentals down, and it's going to come down to scheduling between the crews to make sure that equipment is utilized
Right.
and not underutilized.
I just want to state that this has become an increasing problem. This didn't happen, 3-4 years ago. It seems to be, I don't know if we've gotten too busy or, what it is, but it's that, I'm glad
Yes,
that
ma'am.
you're on it.
It's definitely on my radar.
And we also have to consider, they charge us to pick it up and drop it off. So we have to take that in consideration too. So I trust that you'll weigh all that.
Our goal is not to really have to rent any equipment unless we're doing a specialized project where we need it, or there is some catastrophic failure with our equipment.
But we do pre-position and in advance of a storm last year, prior to Milton, we had got a couple extra rubber tires and some additional equipment to make sure that we were fully stocked for debris removal if we got hit by the brunt of the storm. as it turned out, the tornado did a lot of damage. And we were able to utilize those machines in their capacity. So they did work out quite well. But, sometimes when you have all these municipalities and contractors fighting over equipment, we're lucky with the rental houses we do business with. We put in a call ahead of time, and they're very good at reserving machines for us.
And one last thing, just for the public and for any new members. But what we do is when we're on a project or even with our graders, we don't bring them back anymore necessarily to the maintenance building. We keep them out because sometimes it can be 30 or a 45-minute drive one way to get that equipment there. So a lot of times people may see that equipment sitting there on a Friday, and we might not have a crew out there on a Friday. No, I know, I understand, but I just want to make sure if you see some equipment out there over the weekends or in the evenings or Fridays, that's also the case. And no, we've handled that situation a while back. So, but
And I know
appreciate that.
sometimes we have that issue out in the M3, but I understand it's such a distance to move the equipment back and forth over there. So sometimes that's the case. And, we're relying on Mr. Robinson out there, pretty much solely. And he's, has other responsibilities other than that. So, the hauling, and that's why I brought up, really the hauling of the equipment. Yeah, so there are going to be some cases, especially in the far reaches.
But to that point, in Santa Rosa Groves was one that I received several phone calls from. If we are leasing a piece of equipment to work on Santa Rosa Groves, we need to make sure that we have the staff designated to be able to do it. And I am concerned, Mr. Robinson, you're going to be very busy. And so you're not going to be the one that's on that piece of equipment in the future. So I hope that you guys are thinking of what that plan is to continue the work and do what's needed.
Yes, ma'am, that's been considered, and that's on one of the line items here. And also, as we do purchase the machines, everything is outfitted with the GPS. So I can pull everything up on my phone now and see at a glance what's moving, what's not. And it gives a complete history report of idle hours, runtime, what gear it's been in. So I can make sure that those machines are being utilized. And with the rental machines, like I said, going back to the crew chief and doing spot checks, that what they're reporting in is what's accurate.
All right, so now we'll move into M2. So the total expenditures proposed for M2 are $772,253, and that results in a per acre assessment of $213.44, and that's an increase of just under $74 per acre for the year. And so the majority of your expenditures are in personnel. So it's 501,000 are your personnel costs. Your operating costs are 127,000, and your capital outlay are 144,000. And as Mr. Hansen had mentioned, for your capital outlay equipment expenditure, it's being split between M1 and M2. So the amounts that you see here in M2 is just a proportional share of the total cost for the equipment. And then we have the metal decking. Mr. Hansen, do you want to address this one? This is the
Well,
split.
I believe
Mhm.
earlier I said that it would be covered over 2
2 years.
fiscal years.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so now we can go to M3. And the proposed budget for M3 is $73,030. And so the per unit assessment on M3 came in at $327.65. Now, this is for all charges to M3, not just this maintenance. It includes administration and the aggregate production amount. So it's a total change of $120.46. And so we'll take a quick peek at what makes up that 73,000. So just under 41,000 of that is personnel, and then your operating costs came in at 30,000, just about 30,000, and then you have 2,800 in equipment.
Okay, so. I'm sorry. Oh, ladies in the front row. Sorry. If you don't mind, if you really need to talk, please step outside. Thank you. So the residents in Santa Rosa Groves, the M3 Unit 20, are pretty adamant that they do not want to be part of the aggregate production. They feel that there's not enough information, and the fact that we have much larger lots and each acre, everything is charged by acre. It's quite a substantial increase. So therefore, even though we don't have all the accurate information yet, they wish to be removed from the aggregate. So I'm just going to put that out there now while we're discussing it, and then the board can discuss it after the presentation.
Can we scroll back down just a little bit to see the breakdown of the M3?
You wanted to see the assessment or what makes up the total number?
I'll let you know when you get there.
Okay,
Stop right there for a second.
okay.
Okay, keep going, please. Where does it show the aggregate in here? What's that under the?
The
This,
total budget is 73,000.
Mhm.
And then the aggregate is in the aggregate production department.
Okay,
But I put the total unit assessment for unit 20 here for comparison reasons. So that you know that that number in comparison to the prior year, what your increase is for the total for all of your departments that unit 20 pays into. So they pay into administration, their maintenance, and ag production.
okay. What was the aggregate total for per acre? Was that $59, right? And change?
$59.44.
Okay.
Yes, for ag production, 59.40.
And they want to be removed from that? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So just through the chair while we're speaking about that.
Mhm.
So if that were to occur, if the board did do that, then we will have to go back into their budget and we will have to reflect that with hauling and whatever the material costs would be for maintenance of the, what roads we do have out there that require it. And it would be at whatever the cost would be from the Palm Beach aggregate, because we could not pull from the M2 impoundment
Correct.
expansion, as Ms. Argue has deemed
Right.
it.
And it's my understanding that it's all, the aggregate, the Palm Beach aggregate is already at 20.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we've got 180,000 to do with the roads, to do the hardening. And we are proposing 13,000 in materials. So we're looking at $193,000. How confident are we, barring any issues, which we know we have out there, that the remainder of the roads can be hardened? And now there's some questions about pole moving and the potential of an expense with that, which has not actually been brought to the district yet. So that would be an assessment of almost equal value to that. So one of the residents contacted one of the project managers, and apparently they're in legal, but did not discuss this with the district. But they're in legal to try to charge us to move those poles a substantial amount of money. Which was not discussed with me at all, was not discussed with Mr. Robinson or Mr. Hanson in any of the conversations about moving the poles. So I don't know. This all came about this afternoon. This is all very new detail information, and it's very even premature to discuss it, but I was asked to bring it up, and so I am.
We have not been able to, we just found out about it, as Ms. Tacamonda stated, so we've not even had a chance to contact FPL to even find out about that.
Right.
Who are they charging residents? Or
They're gonna charge the district to move the poles.
did the district request it?
So right now, to get the Marie Court, there are some poles that are in the roadway. It's in the easement. Where the current road is, it's not even in our legislative boundary. It's outside of it. We've been going back and forth, and we have discussions now with their project management team and their engineers. We're sending them the drawings that we have from the unreported plat. As of today, Nicholas Garcia is their engineer that has requested some of our drawings on that. There's been no discussion of any charges to the residents or the district for moving poles. A lot of those poles are, I wouldn't even, they're more like woodpecker houses than power
Mhm.
poles.
These are the ones that they installed that we said needed to be in a certain location because of, remember when we were working on activating the unit?
That's correct. So where the
Not the ones.
where the main line comes in is basically where our pump station is, where proposed. From there, heading east, approximately half a mile, that line has been hardened up and they're right on the boundary. They're good to go. All the remaining poles they're haphazardly spread out throughout that square mile.
And my recollection is they need to be replaced anyway.
Mhm.
So, and FPL didn't they just propose a
Oh.
huge?
Never mind.
Didn't they just propose a huge rate increase?
Yeah, they're
versus
still
the-
working through that. Yeah,
Okay.
it hasn't been approved yet, but yes. So that's the same gentleman, by the way, that told the resident that it was gonna be $200,000.
So the trash removal, I'm curious why there's a trash removal charge here. Why are we removing trash from there? Is that part of,
We do have illegal
Debris.
dumping.
Yeah,
but why are we paying for that? That should be SWA. They're paying SWA. Why are we removing trash?
We're removing trash that from illegal dumping operations. They won't come over and pick that up. On occasions, they've been picking up
along Carrots.
along Carroll from where the old
they don't
trash
wanna-
cans were located. But we've had several piles throughout the district, throughout the basin.
Okay, but again, illegal dumping is the responsibility of the county and SWA. The resident shouldn't have to be paying for
Mhm.
that.
Unfortunately, some of the dumping has been proven to be from some of the residents. So I think that's where they started drawing the line because they were coming out and they were finding documents or whatever that showed that it was actually from some of the residents.
But why is all the other residents having? to pay for it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So if there are
They're not
residents,
following up. The environmental department of the police are not following through. We've provided license plates, all of that and nothing. There's never been any reimbursement to anyone.
So if the board.
And we pay a lot of money.
I mean, we can remove that. It's a minimal amount.
It's
anyway.
pennies, right?
Yeah, so, but we
No.
can remove it, 'cause I'm.
but every penny does
Counts.
matter.
Right,
When
exactly.
you're talking $120 increase, that's $600 for a 5 acre lot, and that's what most of these people have. So, and what I find interesting is that I thought that we had a maintenance amount already in the budget for the M3, so. But it doesn't show anything from fiscal year 2025. Is that because it wasn't allocated?
Yeah.
And so, okay.
Mhm.
But we were charging a maintenance amount. So
Yes.
what
Yes.
were they paying? What was the budget? What were they paying in maintenance for last year?
42,000. So it's
Forty-two
in,
thousand, and it's increasing to the 73,000?
yes,
And we did find that there's been a lot more calls and requests for
Mhm.
maintenance since we started working out there. So that is something that yeah,
The maintenance that we're doing right now primarily takes place for the grading of Carroll Street. And also we have regular calls to do mowing. We do 2 cycles a year. And now that we have all but, I would say, 1/4 mile left to clear, that property had changed hands. Enough said. This is real time, what it takes out there to do the maintenance. For two mowing cycles for flat, 2 mowing cycles for boom. That is the lion's share of it. And then the rest would be maintenance grading of Carroll Street.
And,
Once-
okay, sorry.
We have been doing the interior roads on a semi-monthly, bi-monthly as needed. Once we get done with the additional hardening in there, we should be pretty good for 6 to 8 months. But then we'll still be resuming operations and continuing operations on Carroll Street.
And another thing that brings up something else that is not necessarily for tonight, but just to put to the thought of the board. The residents are very concerned because we've got units that are not activated and they do not pay and they are creating traffic. And the residents want to see those units activated. So.
They don't have the choice.
So I'm just letting you know what the residents want, so.
But can I just
Putting
state
that out
for the
there.
record that the whole board know, this was a discussion that we had over and over and over again with the residents of Santa Rosa Groves. If you wanted Carroll Street improved, then you were going to be responsible for maintaining it. We could not and cannot force other people to activate and spend all that money until that's what they want to do, or the board decides that we're going to push it. But that's not something that we can just say because Santa Rosa Groves doesn't pay
I
for it. They knew going
understand.
into it. So
And remember, we have a lot of new residents as well that
We-
did not own back then. And
We also-
they don't even understand how the whole process worked. I was asked a question the other day if anybody had turned their easement over yet. So this is what we're dealing with. And we have a lot of investors and we have a lot of people that are renting the properties and they have no understanding of how any of this works. So
think
I was
the
asked to
bigger-
relay the message. So just so you're aware, that's why we had a room full of people from the other unit that is not activated that wanted that road open. And now the residents of Santa Rosa Groves are seeing that how much activity there is from outside Santa Rosa Groves.
But it
So I'm
always
just-
existed.
Um,
So,
I agree. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just relaying the message.
let me just say that the bigger problem, I think, that's going on in Santa Rosa Groves is, how do I put this? Some of the uses of the property that are impacting the roads and those landowners are not paying for their burden on those roadways. And that is something that we do need to discuss. We're not going to discuss it tonight and solve that problem tonight. We brought it up before, but that's what's causing the need for additional road material. I've heard some stories. Mr. Robinson told me about, putting some material down on a road, coming back from vacation several days later,
Mhm.
and it was all destroyed. And then, of course, we've got complaints from the residents because those residents say, well, we activated so we could get service and have, decent roads. But we're trying to improve the roads and maintain the roads. And then we've got residents coming along and destroying it after we've done it.
Mhm.
So that is having a fiscal impact here. And I warned about this when we had this discussion several months ago. We do need to figure out a way to address this problem. Because it's not fair to some of these residents, a $600 increase, they can't bear it. It's too much. And not only
Yep.
that, their taxes are going up with the county because since they activated, their values have also increased. So, they're paying more taxes than county taxes as well, and they're not getting anything from the county. So,
And then we've got a lot of properties that pay very minimal to the county that are bringing in a lot of trucks. They're building without permits. Granted, that permit fee and the impact fee from that, I've paid tens of thousands of dollars. We don't see that out here. We know that. That's, standard. So those landowners are not contributing equally. So yeah, it is a problem. It is a problem. And it's a problem for the 14 residents that are out there. We have a lot of illegal building going on, and it's creating an impact for everybody else out there.
if I may, just before we move off of the M3.
Yeah,
the other
sorry,
thing-
I
No, you-
I had to,
It's fine. So the other thing to remember is while you're looking at the maintenance, and I know you brought up about the bond and
Mhm.
rebuilding of the roads, but there's significant rebuilding with even Marie. It goes anywhere from what, 6 inches in elevation that's required to almost
Yeah.
2.5, almost 30 inches.
Very
of
low.
elevation. So the material that you'll be purchasing, whether it's through the in-house aggregate or M2 expansion or the Palm Beach. Yeah, there could be significant
I,
differences there,
yep.
which then stops.
My suggestion would be that we, adopt this tonight, but that we intend to come back and look at this and actually have a cost comparison on how we're going to address that. Because if you're going to need material and you got to do those improvements and they're not paying into that, what is that scenario? Are they paying $180,000 over here versus $250,000? We need to know that, because I think that
And this
the
is
residents.
this
if
is
they
what
have the
I-
Information.
absolutely, and this is what I tried to explain to them, and we had a meeting. Unfortunately, it was Saturday evening, and it didn't allow us enough time to get this information back to them. And one of the residents put together something with assumed numbers, which were not accurate. Today was a very busy day, as you know, budget meetings getting ready for tonight. The information came back to me at 4:00. I posed it to the residents and they said, no. I said, let's buy in for now. Let's have this conversation. We've got a month, more than a month to have this conversation. He said, then you're going against what we want, because they're not understanding. And I reiterated this on numerous occasions that night, that we can lower it, but we can't raise it. Either we buy in tonight or we're done. So
Well, and the alternative is
it's going to
we're
be,
not going to be able to do the work. that's needed to be
exactly.
done.
And that's my concern. And that's what I was trying to make everybody understand, that this could be a potential problem. And the numbers that were put in the presentation, and while I appreciate that somebody went to that effort to try to calculate those assumptions, the numbers weren't accurate. And it wasn't, I guess we could say, according to the water control plan, the standard of the district. And even though we feel like we don't need that standard, but then the costs on the back end are higher, right?
The district
So
standard
it's
is minimum
period,
standard.
right? So, right. So you want below that. And then on the back end, you're going to pay twice as much money.
And then complain when your road is.
Exactly.
Can't truck.
So, right. So I am just reiterating and repeating what the residents are saying. And so,
It called for 3 inches of road rock, compacted road rock, that wouldn't last
right.
a
A
few
couple of
months.
dump truck runs
That's
and it'll be
basically
done.
we put down on Badoo, and then it got destroyed after,
Right.
20 dump trucks hit it.
Can I request that you put together the scenario, not including them in the ag production versus
Yeah, that's what
cost
he's,
if we're paying.
yeah,
do
that's
a
what we're
cost
working on.
comparison.
Yep.
Would that include
Yeah.
hauling? This other one doesn't
Yes.
include hauling.
Right.
So that'll all be incorporated into the cost comparison.
We'll put something.
And that would be, that's, as you guys are saying, that's my concern too, that we pull this and a year down the road, they're very upset because sometimes, you get what you ask for and then you're very sorry for it. And
Right.
obviously we don't want to see that happen either.
Right. We don't want to be short-sighted with the whole thing.
Mhm.
And I just want,
That's what we're saying.
But you have to understand we're so many more acres. We've got one landowner that's 40 acres, but you bought 40 acres. So you going into this, knowing that you were paying per acre, but it's very difficult to hear, I'm going to have a near $5,000 tax increase. It's a lot. It's a hard hit. Times are tough. So I understand. However, could that end up costing you $10,000 down the road instead? So this is why we needed more time to come up with this comparison. There just wasn't enough time. from when we got this to that.
Through the chair. So when does this need to be turned in by? What's our date?
So what we're bringing forward tonight, as I said, we need to turn in or transmit to the county what the assessments will be at a maximum for the trim, which is required by state statute. And we have to have that in probably within a week from now, sometime next week, because, or even sooner, because of our unit complexity. We have to make sure, and they want us to make sure, that whatever they put on the trim notice, a couple of you were not on the board a couple of years ago, whenever we took the R2 bond off and put the R3, but they kept the R2 bond off, and it created a firestorm with the trim notice because they had a new person over there. So now we want to make sure whatever we submit to them, whenever they calculate it, we go back and make sure it's what we said, because there's so many different units here.
In the event we want to, after you guys review this and get some more substantial prices there to reflect, do we have to have a mandatory meeting with all 5 board members here like we are tonight? Because I know we made some serious sacrifices to be here.
Well,
On a
as
July,
long as we have it
to
done
have all
before
of us.
mid-September,
Mhm.
you can do it at a regular board meeting.
Okay.
I believe, because you're just making an adjustment and.
But you're making an adjustment down. So that, in other words, we would have to have added them in tonight
Mhm.
and then have the analysis completed. Meet with the residents and explain the difference, if it makes sense. And then we could lower it at our next board meeting.
Gotcha.
But we can't not do it tonight and then go back next month and say, oh, shoot, we made a big mistake. Right. And this has been my concern.
Let me just say for dates, it's July 15th under the statute, but we have to get things earlier into the property appraiser. But
And our meeting is not until the 16th, correct?
Right. Yes, July
The day
15th.
after.
And, but the drop dead date to certify the taxes to the tax collector is September 15th.
Right.
So
We could
you
do it in
have
August.
to, pardon?
We could
do it in
lower
August.
it in August.
After school starts.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's just one other complexity to this. Let's say that you decide to opt out, but 2 years down the road, you want to opt back in. It's, at least from my perspective, it's unfair to the landowners in the M1 and the M2 to have paid for that, and then you re-enter
Right.
it.
So we would have
They're paying
to
for the
pay,
production.
right, we would have to pay for the outlay that everybody's making now. And I brought that up. If we change our minds later, we're gonna have to go back and pay all of this.
Would be all, so if it's like 4 years, that's 3 years plus 4th year.
Right.
That's a big amount. So
Right.
that's why we're recommending you be included in it, because at some point down the road, you know, the landowners out there are going to have to make a decision, because you still have substantial work to do, just
Right.
not on roadways, but on the rest of the canals and swales.
Exactly.
Well,
I'll begin working on the cost comparison. It's going to take me a few days to get some additional trucking numbers in to zero in on that. Then I'll meet with our engineer to verify all the calculations are correct. He can wave his magic wand over it, and then we can give that to the board and relay that to the residents of Santa Rosa.
Thank you.
Go.
So I just wanted to check and see, how does this affect the other units? If we're not taking money from, to help offset the cost of the
Gonna
aggregate,
increase
we're
everybody,
now going to increase the R2 and R.
the M1 and
One,
M2.
yeah, M1 and
M1 and
M2.
Yeah, they would
That
have to
cost-
absorb that
Yeah.
capital outlay.
644 acres would have to be absorbed by the rest of the M1 and
Right.
M2 units.
And does Santa Rosa Grove, they would benefit from this 644 outlay that we're going to be preparing, correct? So they would.
No.
That's the 644
Yeah.
acres within Santa Rosa Groves.
Okay.
So that cost
Now, what
have to be.
she's saying is when the 640 impoundment is done,
Yeah,
would
yeah.
the M3 benefit? No, because the M3 has its own permanent outfalls.
Okay.
Not for
into-
water
Right,
storage.
Okay.
right,
But-
only from the material,
Material,
The
Right.
material they would.
they,
benefit.
Right.
they could, yes, they
which
could
is
benefit.
dirt, the base rock, riprap, whatever we
But,
need.
and they also, I mean, I would hope it's going to explain to them, because like you said, it's 20, I think it's 21, isn't it almost 21 or $22?
It's currently $20.
$20.
Mhm.
Okay, but it was going to go up a little more, wasn't it? I thought I heard like a $22 or $23. Yeah.
It was the commercially available price is 24. Now, Ms. Argue had said that, thank you. Another municipality was paying 19, and I'll be reaching out to them tomorrow to see where they're piggybacking from, if they're getting it from the same source as well. Because sometimes they buy aggregates that are, different recyclers, crush their own material, like a crushed concrete. For base, if you're not doing a DOT project, it's acceptable. So I'll have to see and verify their source and their funding, but I'll start working on the cost comparison tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to also, when I was with SWA, I did talk to them about they have, I guess, aggregate that they could maybe do an interlocal with us. I guess they have material that they have there.
Yeah, for
So-
RSM crap that nobody wants.
I don't know. They said that it was within, I don't know. I just,
Yeah.
So we can look into that as well.
So I did a quick calculation. And it doesn't seem to add up. But 5940 and 644 acres, that's $38,253. So if they're paying that, I don't know where that number is in here. Or if it's just that it's. spread
No,
out
it's
and
not.
so It's in the individual line items.
No. So the total 327, so the 327.65 is for all departments that Unit 20 fund. So it includes administration, the ag production, and the maintenance. So it's all three. So this 327 here includes all three departments that Unit 20 pays into. This is not just for their maintenance. This is all except debt, except for their bond. This is their per unit acre assessment for all departments.
So to put basically $40,000, spread it out under it, and let me just finish this. Spread it out under the other
The other unit,
that's like $40,000. How many acres are we talking in the other?
I think M1 has 16,000 and M2 has, I don't remember. what M2 is.
Everyone has 18.
18,
M2 is 4,200.
okay.
So we're looking at about 25,000 acres.
Mhm.
So that's like $1.53 more per acre. Basically a rough guesstimate. So we're not, I mean, if we just added a few dollars to the other,
The other ones.
and then if we adopt it, we're at the high end. If we decide to take option A or B, then we just adjust in August, you
Yes.
know? So it's not that, or we find that $1.53 somewhere else, which I'm sure we can. And that was gonna be one of my questions, whether or not we can actually get that number down for the ag production. I mean, do we have to have all that money right now, this year, this upcoming budget year? Or can we,
Let me go
see
to ag-
where we're doing.
Let me go to ag
Things.
production so you can see those numbers.
And again, I don't like the ag production because essentially what we're doing is we are expanding the M2 impoundment. And my thought always was that there's another way that it could be done rather than, I mean, there's a capital in infrastructure thing that we have to invest in for the whole district. Because it's not just the M2, it's gonna be the M1. And the M3 would benefit from what is produced. But the other way that we could do it is actually a fee for every project, just like we're paying aggregates is $20 a load, then we're paying hauling on top of that. So every time you take a load and and this is more complicated and you're probably gonna blow your mind, but you know, it's something we can think about, is what I'm saying, is that you can, so rather than we're couching it the way that we are,
Mhm.
it's actually a material budget. Right? And each M2, M1, M3 is paying for that material, or roads, wherever you've got it, you've got that line item, because that's the way it used to be. We used to have $1 million in the budget, or $1.5 million in the budget for road rock. We've just named it something else and moved it differently. So
But you
There-
would also have to consider salaries for the individuals who would be working
Right.
there. So it would also be salaries and
right,
rental of equipment. Yeah. So you would still, I think you would still end up with the line items. Just not maybe a separate department. It would just be
Right.
included in another department, but you would still have the same line items. In essence, to run the production.
yeah. It's the production part that I have a problem with, because
So,
we're expanding the M2 impoundment. We're gonna expand the M1 impoundment, right? And the benefit of doing that is from a drainage perspective, we get that increased drainage. And then we have the material. And we benefit from the use of that material. It's gonna save us money elsewhere. So I think people don't really understand that. I think that they think that we're going into the mining business. That's not what we're doing. Right? The primary responsibility is the drainage aspect and
Yes.
increasing the drainage, which we have a dire
Right,
need.
the
in
rock is
district.
just an added benefit
It's
to
a
that. And I don't think people
need-
realize that how shallow we're actually going either.
Right.
We're not mining, we're just excavating. We're not
What our permit allows us to do.
exactly already. And we're not breaking into, we're not going below sea level or anything like that, where there's going to be any kind of intrusion. This is not what's happening to our west.
We're not
Um,
blasting.
Right, we're not blasting, we're not, right.
Yeah.
We're doing what's permitted under our statutory
There's 5 feet
authority,
of Drop between.
what we've
sea
been
level
doing,
and-
right. And I'd also like to point out,
And it's not first. time.
what was another thing that was brought up, which I find it a little troubling just in and of itself. But apparently someone internally stated to a resident that it's not effective, we're not producing, it's not working. And I said, well, and I had the budget in my hand printed, and I said, well, you realize that we're not actually doing it yet. This is testing of equipment to see what equipment we're going to need.
We actually
what we're
did
gonna-
already do all the testing in 20.
Well, we're testing
We did.
the equipment. In other words, the new equipment, right? So I don't know if you went out yet or if you.
No, I haven't, I don't need to,
but,
because
right,
we
you
actually
know,
already did this.
right.
We already
So-
were producing.
So, right. So, but this is what's going to get that ball rolling. In other words, that ball has not been rolling. So to say it's ineffective or inefficient at this point is quite premature. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Unless they were
because that's
basing it on what we did.
disturbing.
'Cause
No,
that
no,
comment- I
currently-
made that comment.
Currently, yeah, currently.
Just through the chair, part of the reason why I asked for a separation is, just from my experience, but also learning from Mr. Johnson, before I came here. Whenever we do something like this, I want to make sure that we know where every penny went and where every ounce of material went. And that's why I really put the onus on Mr. Robinson and Ms. McIntosh to really drill down on this, and that's why I asked them to do it in a separate department.
Mhm.
Because what I didn't want to happen is like 5 years down the road, there's a new, well, oh, you guys didn't do this. We're gonna track this literally down to the penny and looking at the weight, everything that comes out of there to make sure that it is properly charged to whether it be the M1, M2, or if M3 participates. So, well, again, I'm trying to get to a finite level of detail. So part of that is probably from me putting that pressure on them. And from an auditing and accounting standard, I wanted to make sure, and I think we all knew that where everything goes, we can account for it quickly and accurately and not be like, well, let us go back and look. And so I want to start with that level of attention to detail in the very beginning of this and moving forward. So
We've been
I appreciate that.
excavating that impoundment expansion for decades. This makes it transparent where every dollar is accounted for. It's not buried in equipment rental. It's not buried in road rock line items. It's not buried in equipment,
Mhm.
assorted salaries and overtime. Everything is in there. The only thing I could see just briefly looking at this, aside from the equipment, it's pretty much that's what it's going to take to get the job done efficiently and to stay within the prospectus is instead of purchasing the dewatering pump, and here we go back again, we're rent one for the time we're using it, but then again, that would be maybe a $60,000 savings, but we'd have to purchase one eventually anyway for the other
Use it
cells.
For other projects.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right. My thing is, are you gonna use every single piece of this equipment this year? Because as I recall, there's a process. And you don't need every single piece of equipment all at one time. You can't do it all at the same time. So,
With the exception of within the fiscal year, we will use every piece of machinery. And we could stagger them out because we do have to excavate the top cut. So we could postpone the screener for several months until that material dries out. So we absolutely need it. But the excavator, the pump, and the trucks are paramount.
But the screener would still be needed within the FY 26.
Within the fiscal year, but
So
we
we
could
still
push
need
it out
to-
probably 3 months.
But that doesn't change the budget,
Doesn't change the fiscal year overall.
right?
there's no way to stage it, that's where I'm going.
Not for that long.
Okay,
So
We wouldn't be able to push it out for an entire year.
to add on to what Miss Argy is saying, as she was saying earlier, if rental equipment sitting around wasting money, obviously if we're leasing something sitting around wasting money. When you have what you need, whether it's leased, we own it, whatever, are you guys ready to start on day one, full throttle and get the project going?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
So we're not going to start till we have the staff in place.
we have done the the crew chief interviews for
Excellent.
the first round. We did the oral interviews. We're going to do a practical. And then from there, we'll narrow it down to 2 candidates and then we'll do a final round and involve Mr. Hanson. He would like to be involved in that as well.
Excellent, thank you.
I have a quick question. Relating to the ag production unit, isn't the first year going to be the most expensive with the purchasing of equipment and stuff?
The upfront costs are the way the lease, this is laid out right now. The first 3 years are pretty much all going to be the same. The only variable that will be in this would be the outliers are fuel.
Mm.
But as you know, if this current administration does what they are intended to, fuel prices should stay relatively stable for the next 3 years. The only increase we may see is payroll and taxes and insurance.
Well, the reason asking is if you M3 wants to opt out in year 3 or 4, then the per acre would be down. So they just skipped out on the purchase of it, but then year 4 or 5, they come in and want the services now that it's, you know.
Right, well, that's what I
$30.
said, they would have to pay into what everybody else already paid into. Right,
That was just the startup. You said about 3 years and then potentially. Because what happens when it gets to be where it's producing, let's say it produces and it's a self-funding operation, you know. The aggregate, and now they want to
After-
do it when it's free.
We're going to see the biggest savings after the 4th year because we'll be done with the initial leases and then the equipment purchases after that 4th year. We will see a dramatic savings after that because now we're not having to fund all that equipment and it is viable for at least 10 years.
Yeah, that was just what I'm saying, you know, year 4, all of a sudden they want to come back around. I mean, any unit or any, you know. but-
right. And I can't see that we're not gonna need maintenance ongoing. It's just not, even once the roads are hardened, we're still gonna need maintenance, we're still gonna need materials.
And the biggest thing going back to Unit 20 is it is paramount that the basin meets the current flood protection that is proposed in the water control plan with the perimeter elevation of 22.5 and GBD.
Right. Which
That
I
is paramount.
pointed out.
We've seen breaches before in the past
Mhm.
from farm pumping.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that that perimeter elevation is set and that is a non-starter right there. That has to be done.
All right, so we're in ag production. No, I'm scared to say that name. Supervisor argue. Supervisor argue has me scared to say that.
So I think they hit everything on this, so.
Yeah, I think we
Time and
pretty much
Aquatics is.
beat that.
Yes.
Obviously.
The numbers are what they are. We've done for we're still on 20.
No.
I have a
Okay.
question about the chemicals
Aquatics.
and these numbers in the chemicals. So we budgeted 100,000, we've only spent 4,000. Why is that?
Is this in the aquatics budget?
Yeah,
It's under contracts.
Oh, I don't know if you want, I know the answer, but I don't know if you want to.
Go ahead. My brain hasn't caught up to
Okay,
aquatic
so
yet.
based on my discussions with Mr. Schaefer, the chemicals get purchased towards the end of the fiscal year. And that's
Okay.
why that budget is so
Okay.
under right now.
very good.
It's
Thank
because the
you.
chemicals don't get purchased.
Thank you. That just, because if people are looking at
Yes.
this, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
thank you for putting that out.
You're welcome.
I concur.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
On the aquatics, I haven't seen, maybe we're doing it and it's somewhere else, but I have not seen where we are restocking with the fish
What,
and
I've talked to Mr. Schaefer on that because that wasn't addressed in here. The carp that we get, the grass eating carp, they start out really well in the first few years. And the bigger they get, the less they eat. Doesn't make any sense. Even with the fish gates that we have on, we lose a lot of the fish that way. It was $10,000 for however many fish we get. We didn't see the return on that it was actually viable to keep stocking with the grass eating carp every year. And that's what he had told me.
well, I would like to see that, I mean, not just the grass eating part, but I'd also like to see in like Coconut Park, for example, is a fishing location. We like to stock it for fishing and we have to replenish that every now and again. And we haven't replenished that in probably, I don't know, I would say 4 or 5 years. So I'd like to see that we're doing that I don't know how much.
Stop
money-
starving the
It's not-
alligator.
Not, yeah, well, no, but you have to constantly be replenishing.
Well, you believe it or not, the birds do a lot of that replenishing because as they fly around, they transfer eggs.
Yeah.
So we never put one fish in our pond and my pond is loaded with fish. The alligators love it.
Well,
I was gonna ask,
Mhm.
I was gonna ask if we did need, do we see a need for replenishing the, like coconut?
We did. I mean, that would probably be better suited for parks, or we could look at opening M1 impoundment for more fishing, because that is overstocked. It was quite successful. We had FWC out there. That the impoundment out there is loaded.
We'll see if FWC may have a program for giving some fish
Yeah,
to us.
That would be
for
great.
Coconut specifically
Yeah.
and try to.
yeah,
coordinate
where we
with them
can
when
keep
we
them
Open it.
Yeah.
Fishing there
without them
as well.
swimming out to the L8 or whatever.
This is gonna be my naive question, but could we just transfer what's out in the M1 to the various spots in the area? I know we have an employee, a staff member that likes to fish on those
I
Saturdays,
think
so,
what it is.
yeah.
That would be something we can explore. I don't know about the legality of us transporting fish from one location to another without being a
I,
licensed.
I have to, so I will say, I think isn't it Royal Palm that does the fishing contest? And I believe we brought the fish back to them in Royal Palm. I think. I'd have to double check with my son. but-
We can,
Yeah,
we
like
can
that.
ask. I've never transported fish.
Yeah.
so it's not like I'm talking $5,000, I think is what I recall we used to put into. Huh? For fish? Just buy it, yeah, I think it was like $5,000, $10,000.
Well,
It just, I haven't seen it anywhere and I know it's been a few years, so.
Maybe something to consider when that park gets reopened to a fishing tournament there or something off base right now, but you know,
Yeah.
all right.
so we'll adjust the budget to include 5,000, whatever for restocking. And we'll first talk to, we've been
Yeah, we'll
talking
do-
to Tom
Good
Reinhardt
program.
quite a bit, so we'll see if there's something they could even do, because it's
Right.
such a small area.
Right.
So, it probably won't even be $5,000 to restock
No,
that.
'cause I think that was the number for the whole
Yeah.
budget to restock the park.
I think it was 10,000.
Mine now.
And
Yes.
different.
Yeah.
All right, and then lastly, we wanted to show what the bond repayment per unit would be. And so the unit 18 assessments would be 952.75. Unit 20, 641.72, and R3 would be $51.48. And then again,
The unit assessments, we've already
yes,
reviewed that up front, so
Mhm.
now we're.
yeah, so what we had was
For any other board questions or input? Yeah. that would be- oh,
Michael?
Rich? Nope.
You're right.
I'll make the motion to adopt the budget with the following adjustments. One is to put a small increase on the I guess it's the M1 and M2 for the ag production, like we talked about. I think it's like $2 an acre. And I don't know, what, another 50 cents for maybe 250 for the fish.
Well, you can just ask us to redirect on the fish, but I don't know that for the ag, we need to
We need
make
to-
sure we
yeah.
add that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause-
I want to make sure we keep them free.
right. So that's what my recommendation is, that we put the 250 increase on the 5940 for the M1 and the M2. Leave the M3 in there for now. And then in August, you can, or July meeting, whatever, if you could come back with a comparison of that, and then we can make a decision and adjust the budget accordingly. Which would be going down, not up. Presumably.
Are we doing the trash removal? You're taking.
Yeah, we'll take the trash removal $1,000 out of the.
I just don't think we should be paying for what the
I
county should be
agree.
doing their job.
Mhm.
So. But that means that when residents call and complain, we
They
don't
need
pick that
to-
up.
Right.
Yeah. And
It's not our job, it's SWA.
And what about all the debris that we pulled out of the canals, like tires and stuff like that? That's still out there. How do we handle that?
That's part of the maintenance, yeah, the clearing and.
well, that would be where we're clearing it as
Mhm.
part of the bond. We would use that to cover that cost.
We, through chair, we still have one, current pile that we have at halfway down, Antoinette.
Mm-hmm.
That will be going on to the bond contract. Everything else on there, it's actually been pretty clear. We get an occasional tire in there. It really doesn't add up to a lot. If we were to see significant activity, that would raise a red flag. Right now, the ponds the canals, are actually pretty clean. We removed a lot of that when we went through and did the
And
initial.
I hate to even have to ask this question, but you know where I'm going with this. You haven't been finding anything that you don't want to touch lately, right? No new surprises, right?
We've had aquatics go through there. We just sprayed. So we might see an uptick in that, but until everything's died off, I haven't.
Okay. That's
Our
good
staff
news.
hasn't reported anything.
Okay, that's good news to hear. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Can we get with Captain Sant and talk about this and the illegal dumping out there? And since he's new to the district, maybe
There's,
we can get somewhere with that.
yeah, and that Durango is still sitting on Dennis, right?
Yes, that is
Because
correct.
they red tagged that thing. It was been 2 years with Turner was there.
It's been red tagged 3 times.
Yeah,
Um,
and yet they haven't come to take it.
I
And it's an
will,
easement.
that has been brought up to me by a resident.
Mhm.
When we get through there, when we get around the corner to start doing Dennis,
You know, it hasn't been
it'll
an
disappear.
impediment, but yeah, we brought up, talking to Captain Sant. So I had this conversation with Captain Turner when he was still here and it was supposed to get taken care of back then. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we're online and Zoom can hear us and all that, right? Okay, very good. So now public comment. Yes. Remember, still kind of a new system. Bear with us, please. We're getting there. Yeah, because otherwise people can't see this screen now. But thank you for that presentation. It was lovely. Thank you.
How many people are on Zoom?
I can't see on my screen.
Okay.
Asked this earlier. Heard some comments, so.
Microphone.
This budget includes a 3%, up to a 3% merit increase. Not anything more.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
And,
okay,
and the key is up to, so that means most people get between 1.5 to 2%, depending on performance.
No, good. So while we're waiting, apparently FDOT's doing a presentation tomorrow, if it's my understanding. I heard this from, one of the news channels. So I'll be getting some information on that. Hopefully it's not another delay.
Okay. All right,
Yeah. So
Adam Polak. Actually,
Pollock.
Pollock. And actually, he did the, where he registered. before. He said this one.
Okay, Mr. Pollock? Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you. You might be muted.
My microphone should be on right now.
We still cannot hear you. It might
And
be on
what about
our
now?
end. Just bear with us. Oh,
Okay. Can you
we
hear me
can
now?
hear you now.
Hi. So I was the one that sent in the letter, which I'm sure the email, which most of you had read, concerning just some concerns that M2 impoundment. I do understand that the purpose is to create water storage and naturally to empty that out. You would excavate material, and that is part of the duty of the district to do so. Just some of my concerns were what were listed in there, which is just that's essentially pretty much a passive storage parcel right now, and it is surrounded by residential properties on all sides, including my own. And to do a multi-year, excavation project there, where you have equipment digging through, you have rock crushing, and sorting operations, things like that. My concern is the noise generated from that to the again surrounding residential properties, as well as dust in the air, and also when that impoundment is used for its designated purpose, which is for water storage, to pump up and then release, what will be the effects in the surrounding canals when all that high silty water is released from the excavation operations.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. And I'm just gonna let you know that I have discussed this with staff after receiving your email, and we will be in touch with you later on this week. We just had to prepare for this in some in our earlier meeting, which was very critical for us to do. But we will be in touch with you, and we will address your concerns, of course.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just want to state for the record that we are always excavating in the M1, M2. It's always going on. It's been going on. So, Adam, I know where you live. And if you haven't noticed an issue before now, I don't think you're going to notice an issue coming up, but maybe you will.
We're gonna have some.
Through the chair, a lot of that will be answered and it'll be covered in the SOP that's forthcoming.
Thank you. All right. Next, please.
Sharon Wade.
Right, I'm not used to sitting that much ever. I don't even sit home that much. Anyway, Sharon Wick, 15058 75th Lane North. This is gonna seem like a left court, but what about those lobbyists that we pay? What do they do and what are they helping us with?
They got us $450,000 towards the M1.
They did.
Yes, they did. So I guess you didn't see. I did post on social media. Yes, they most certainly did. So they did.
Good.
This is the first time ever.
A return on our money
So, right. And
for once.
yes. So
Okay.
yay to them and thank you to them, which I was going to bring up later, but you brought it up now. So
Well-
yes, it was a big feat and it got through and it got signed by the governor this year. Last year we got all the way to the governor's desk and he said nope and he vetoed it. And
Really?
not this year. So they did a great job for us.
Good.
And
Glad to hear
actually, it's not the first time. It's just the first time.
In a
It's
long
something-
time.
No, we actually got the Corbett levy funding and our
Well-
lobbyists worked for 5 years very hard on getting that.
And that was our local lobbyist.
But
So, right.
yeah,
Well, this is why we need a media person. These
So
things
you
never get
know,
public ever.
and that's why we're doing that.
And where are
It
they?
is
Who
important.
are we gonna get?
Well, that's to be determined. So it's going to be somebody good though. Yeah, it's going to be somebody good.
Okay,
Thank you, Sharon. I think, I don't see.
She had to leave, but she left her part.
Okay, can you want to read it?
Sure. Okay. Pia Scorin, Orange Grove Boulevard. She says that she was surprised to be such expensive reorg proposed. Have supervisors had sufficient time to review? I'm not sure I read correctly, no CFO, 125 to 195 versus a consultant at 500K. Not in favor of widening or changing the structure of our roads for outside use. Not in favor of paving, paying for that. Not in favor of taking outside dollars for roads if it means giving up road ownership. Not in favor of milling roads. We need drainage. Sand roads reflect the sun away. We have climate issues. Millions have not proven to be cheaper or easier to maintain. Stand up to, can't read that. Do we need to pay for a full-time drone position compared to contracting the service? Please make sure we have a healthy, legal, defendable budget. Parks improvement, question mark, question mark. Why do we pay commissions fees? That is what it looks like. I know what that. Taxes. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's all part.
Well, let's call the vote. All in favor? Put it on your machine. Yeah, where's the?
Gotta put back to that.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, see that motion passes unanimously. And does anybody have anything they want to say before we adjourn? I was going to thank our lobbyists, but that's already done. So thank you again to Ruben Turnbull and to the governor for helping us out. I appreciate it. I did veto a lot of things. So I'm grateful for that.
It was a good trip.
can I just say, I'd like to thank Raquel and Burgess for working on this. It was very clear and concise and I'm able to understand, and I like the breakout, and I appreciate the hard work you guys put into doing this for us. So thank you very much.
Betty?
Ditto for me. I appreciate all your work. I do want to state, I hear Pia, I hear the other residents. I received some phone calls and some messages, some people very upset about taxes going up, property assessments. I don't like raising our assessments ever, but it's necessary for us to either do that or to figure out what we're going to stop doing. And it's really kind of that simple and elementary. Now, if there's, you know, some waste that somebody can find in here, staff, the public, I challenge you, you know, find it. And I think every single thing in here is defensible. I don't like it. You know, I
Right.
hate buying new equipment and new vehicles every year, but we have a very large district. We have a lot of responsibilities and it takes money. And that is what a special district is. We're benefit assessed. You pay for the services you receive. By the way, some of the residents that are complaining about us improving our storage area aren't even taxpayers to Indian Trail, but they do receive benefits. They use our roads, they use our parks. So I hope that, every year when we talk about this, I say, I hope that we don't have to go back up next year. But I do hope that next year, we have this sort of ebb and flow where we have to make these capital investments and we're doing big things. And then next year, we can stay steady at least, for the next 3 years. But then we're going to be looking at the M1, impoundment project, and, that's a bigger deal. And it's very important. So, residents scream all the time about, what is the district doing? We're doing a lot, and it's here, it's in the budget, it's line by line. And, but also, in terms of drainage, we're finally getting to a point where we've got, the ability to move forward on that. And it's going to be important to keep that momentum going. But again, it comes with a price. We have to pay for it. Nothing comes for free. But you want us to solve the drainage capacity issue. This is what we got to do. And it's cheaper than buying land, and doing surface water storage, because there's not very much of that around us anymore. So even though what we're doing is still basically surface water, right? It's not, anyway. So, I just want everybody to know that, I just do not make this decision lightly. But I also have gone through it with staff, and I will continue to be going through it between now and August and figuring out ways, especially for Santa Rosa Groves, because that's a huge hit. And we need to look at a way to bring that down. So, thank you.
And it's good to see that really the majority of the districts are, the increase is 1% and 6%. So it's not terrible, but of course, if we can get it down, that would be wonderful. But we have time. So when you get your initial notice, know that that may not be the final number. It might be less than that. All right. Good. The mic's on, so it doesn't show. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I will see you in a couple of weeks. This meeting is adjourned.
When I get my turn.